everyone. Today I'm going to talk about Module 55. And this is about personality and also some of Freud's biggest theories. So, personality is our characteristic way of thinking, feeling, and acting. Another way to say it is, who are you normally? Personality is pretty stable over time, although it can change a little bit. We're likely having the same personality throughout our entire lives. So, thinking, feeling, and acting are what defines our personality. So, thinking might be like, are you optimistic or pessimistic? Do you think realistically and logically, or more imaginatively and creatively? Feeling could be like sad or happy. How stable are your moods? Do they change a lot throughout the day? Um, are you more confident, or do you feel energized? Like some people are super excitable, whereas others are more just kind of low key um, and not very excitable. And then acting is just anything like outward, like are you organized or messy? Um, do you like to try new things, or do you tend to get your work done right away or procrastinate? So that's just a little intro to personality. Probably gonna talk about it more in following videos, but the remainder of this video is going to focus on Freud and kind of his ideas about personality. The two big ideas for Freud is he believed that our personality is influenced by our unconscious mind. So a whole entire part of our mind that we don't even, we're not conscious of, we don't even know what's in it, and our childhood experiences. So let's start with this idea of an unconscious mind. So, Freud kind of believed that we all have this part of our mind that is completely unconscious, that has a lot of things in there that would be disturbing to us if we actually knew about them, which is why our brain kind of makes it so we don't know, and it's like basically thoughts that are not acceptable or would make us anxious are kind of banished into that unconscious realm because they're just too disturbing or dark. He kind of thought that we have like a lot of aggressive and like sexual thoughts in this unconscious part of our mind. And he believed this could cause some problems, like for patients who didn't really have any like physical like problems, um, but like for some reason like lost feeling in one of their hands, or couldn't see or couldn't hear. He kind of had this explanation that it was because they were like repressing that sense because like of something that was like anxiety arousing. So like they didn't want to see anything that would make them anxious, hear anything that would make them anxious. So this was kind of a really out there kind of theory, like nobody had ever really considered before. But this idea of like part of our mind being unconscious was the basis of a lot of his ideas. So some ways that he kind of like got tried to get access to that unconscious mind was through free association, which is he would like have his patients just say whatever came to mind and just kind of like follow their train of thought and just like whatever they were thinking just to say out loud. And you can try this if you want. And he would kind of analyze like what they were saying as like this is the pathway to their unconscious mind if you just like say things like speak whatever you're thinking without like restraint. Next, he kind of thought that there's this like slips of the tongue could like reveal things about your unconscious, which are called like Freudian slips. Um, he also thought that dreams could reveal things about our unconscious, like um, everything in our dream is like a symbol of something that would be like disturbing if it was just flat out. So in like our dream analysis stuff, we did talk about his ideas on that. Um, and then there's these things called projective tests. And these are like ambiguous like images that people kind of interpret in their own way. And they're actually kind of revealing and a little bit like consistent over time. Like people come up with similar stories of seeing like similar images, but they're not like um they're not like completely like perfect either. It's not really like the only thing like about your personality or anything. It's just kind of more of like it shows something about you, but it's not like everything. So some of these tests are the thematic at perception test. You see a ambiguous picture and you make up a story about it. And this ink blot test, where you see 10 different like just ink blots and you have to interpret them. Um, Next is psychoanalysis. So, Freud's idea that our unconscious mind has like all these motivations and conflicts and like tensions. Um, and so he tried to like figure out how that like leaks into our thoughts. Um, yeah, so he thought that like conscious, there are three parts of our minds. So the conscious part is like the tip of the iceberg that like we know about. The preconscious is that part in the middle. It kind of has like our feelings and our memories um that like it's kind of like a access partial access to the unconscious. So like we can have things in our preconscious that can be brought to our conscious. So it's kind of like a little bit under the surface, but it's not so deep that we can't get to it. And then our unconscious, which is like our just unacceptable thoughts that we're unaware of. Um, but modern psychologists also use the term for like unconscious processing of information of the world around us, kind of like that two-track mind idea. So yeah. Next is our three parts of the personality, according to Freud. So first we have the id, which is like our pleasure-seeking, completely selfish, like aggressive, sexual kind of part of our personality that is seeking pleasure. So it operates on this thing called the pleasure principle. So if you think of like a baby, they like they're like driven by the ID, the id. They just like um, cry if they want something, and they don't have any concern for like anybody else. Next is the complete opposite, the superego, which is our morals, and it considers the future. It's our conscience that tells us what's right and what's wrong, kind of regulates us. And thirdly, our ego, which is stuck in the middle, has to mediate between these two opposing forces. It's fully conscious, it's our executive part that is really making the decision. It operates on the reality principle. So that's like, okay, how do I get pleasure, but also being mindful of the future and being realistic. So, for example, you find a wallet on the ground. The id is going to be like, take the wallet, take the money, spend it on drugs, get high, um, buy candy, all of that, just pleasure. The super ego is going to be like, no way, like, you got to return it, you got to look for the ID, do whatever you can, like, don't stop until you find the person this belongs to. And then your ego is like stuck in the middle trying to like figure out what you should actually do. um, Kind of have a compromise. Maybe you listen to one or the other, maybe you just leave it there, do nothing, take some of the money, um, something like that. So this is how Freud defines anxiety, is this conflict between these three opposing parts of our personality, this crazy tug of war that is going on for like everything. um, yeah, that's anxiety, according to Freud. And he said that we have these defense mechanisms that we use, that the ego kind of uses to distort reality so that it's not so intense. So, some of these, for example, are repression. Repression is that banishing of thoughts and feelings that are unacceptable. Regression, which is if you're like upset about something and then you start acting like childish, it's like going back to a previous stage of development. Um, so you feeling bad and you just start kind of acting like a little kid. Um, Reaction formation, which is doing the opposite of what is unacceptable. So, like, imagine you have like a younger sister who loves Disney princesses, but then she's like with a group of older kids and they don't think Disney is cool. And she's actually the one being like the loudest, being like, I hate Disney, like that's so gross. Um, Kind of like that. So it's like saying the opposite, um, of whatever is unacceptable, very loudly, usually. Projection is kind of like putting those unacceptable thoughts onto somebody else. So rather than you are feeling it, you say, oh, somebody else is feeling it. So let's say you didn't make the soccer team, then you'll be like, oh, like my mom is so upset that like the coach didn't let me on the team. She was really mad about it. So you're kind of projecting that. Rationalization is kind of like justifying yourself, being like, oh, I didn't even try that hard at the tryouts. I totally could have done it if I wanted to, though I was just lazy. Displacement is when you can't like directly attack the target, but you can attack something else that's like less threatening. So, like, think of punching a punching bag or like yelling at your brother, just kind of channeling that frustration into something else. Sublimation is when you kind of change that negative thing into a more positive and acceptable thing that's like valued. So if you didn't make the soccer team, maybe you join the cross country team. If you are really bad at painting, maybe you switch to drawing. And denial is you just refuse to accept that it's true. You're like, no, like I am good at painting, or no, I did make the team. There was like an error on the team list, and I'm gonna like talk to the coach about it because seriously, like, there's no way I didn't make the team. Um, Next, we have um, these people who kind of like took some of Freud's ideas but also like changed some of his ideas. We call them Neo Freudians. So, first we have Alfred Adler. So, his idea was that we're kind of driven from our childhood to overcome this feeling that we're inferior to other people. And he called this the inferiority complex. So he's saying that we're striving for this sense of power and superiority because we might feel like we're less than other people. And we just want to be useful, and we just want to feel like we're not inferior. And Karen Horney said that our childhood anxiety kind of brings us to seek love and security. And she also kind of is known for balancing out some of Freud's like masculine like things. Like he kind of thought that like women were like had weak super egos and were like really emotional. So she kind of balanced that. She was like, no, that's not true. And both Horney and um, Adler kind of said that sex isn't quite so influential in our development. It's more like um, social things that influence our development. And lastly, we have Carl Jung, and he had this idea of the collective unconscious. So the collective unconscious is like a shared, like it's like an inherited memory like store. So like all humans like share these memories and these like kind of think of like the prototypes and stuff, kind of like that. But just in general, like we share some core like memories with like all of humans. Like memories are passed on, which isn't like actually accurate, but he kind of used that to explain why like humans have this like need for like religion and also have this like um a lot of like myths are like similar across cultures. So sorry if I said some of those names weird, but these neo Freudians basically kind of followed in some of his footsteps, but also altered some of Freud's ideas. Next, we have the false consensus effect. So this is like if you do something, you think other people do it too. So if you like steal a little bit, you think that's like normal and like everybody does it. If you, yeah, like cheat a little bit, you think other people do it too. Um, Next, the terror management theory. So this is the idea that when people are faced with the reality of their impending death, they kind of tend to value relationships more, be healthier, and kind of turn to religion, try and like figure out what like the purpose of their life really is. Um, and lastly, just kind of an overall reflection on Freud. Um, some people like criticize him because a lot of his ideas are pretty out there and um, are kind of hard to prove. Like he didn't really do like any like hypothesis and then experiment. So he kind of more explained like things that he observed rather than was able to predict things. So that's kind of criticized because it's like, well, you could like make up any explanation after you see the results. Um, but in reality, even though like some of his ideas have been misproven, like, you know, a lot of people remember their trauma. Stress kind of enhances our memory usually. But despite all of these things that, you know, we found aren't actually true, he was a really influential person. He had a lot of very like unique ideas, and some of those ideas um, have definitely like sparked new discoveries. Like he's the first person to really say that like our childhood like matters a lot, and one like first person to say that we have like this unconscious like part of our brain. So that was like pretty impressive that he came up with these like really like new ideas, even though he wasn't like exactly right on them. At least he gave like other scientists kind of a ability to like learn more and research more about these like things. Yeah.